Let's start with a simple scene. 11:47 p.m., one more email, and a waistline that doesn't match what you ate. The office is dark, the only light coming from your screen, and the blinking cursor in yet another urgent email. Your heart is beating a little faster than it should for someone who's just sitting. Coffee from hours ago sits cold beside you next to a half-eaten snack you barely remember chewing. Dinner was a blur, rushed between notifications. Now your stomach feels hollow, but your belt feels tighter. It doesn't make sense. You haven't eaten that much today, yet your waistband is digging in as if you just finished a buffet. This is the phase when modern life quietly moves into your waistline. All day, your phone has been buzzing, your calendar overbooked, your brain juggling deadlines and decisions. Think of it this way. Your body has been running a marathon while you've been sitting in a chair. Caffeine instead of rest. Emails instead of real breaks. Late night work instead of sleep. On the outside, you're just busy. On the inside, one hormone is acting like an emergency broadcaster that never turns off. That hormone is cortisol. Cortisol is supposed to rise in the morning, then gradually fall as the day goes on. It's like a built-in sunrise and sunset for your stress system. But under constant pressure, that rhythm flattens. Instead of peaking and fading, cortisol stays high, humming in the background while you answer one last message. Meanwhile, your body is listening. Your brain reads high cortisol as a threat, the way it once would have during famine or danger, so it quietly changes strategy. It decides to protect you by changing where it stores fat. Around your waist, a different kind of fat is waiting for instructions. Not just the soft layer under your skin, but the deeper visceral fat that wraps around your organs. In fact, this visceral fat has more cortisol receptors than many other areas of your body. It's like a magnet for stress signals. When cortisol stays high, your fat cells in this region become highly responsive, pulling in energy and holding on to it. Your liver, your pancreas, even your heart end up surrounded by this expanding, hormonally active tissue. The scale might barely move, but your belt tells a different story. So what is actually happening to that belly fat and to the organs underneath it? When cortisol stays high day after day, week after week, why can you eat clean, exercise, and still watch your waistline grow? This marks a turning point in how you think about your body. By the end of this video, you'll see how chronic stress can quietly rewrite your metabolism, why your midsection may be changing even when your habits look right, and what you can do to start reversing this hormonal script. Sleep isn't a luxury add-on your schedule can negotiate away. It's a standing contract your body signed long before you were born. To understand that rewrite, you need to meet the hormone directing so much of it, cortisol. Imagine a built-in alarm system wired through your entire body, ready to flip from calm to crisis in seconds. That alarm is your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or HPA axis, and cortisol is the main signal it sends out when it thinks you're in danger. Cortisol is made in your adrenal glands, two small caps of tissue that sit on top of your kidneys like tiny helmets. When your brain senses a threat, an argument, a deadline, a near-car accident, it sends a message down this HPA axis. Your pituitary talks to your adrenals, and they release cortisol into your blood. In fact, that surge is designed to keep you alive. Think of it this way. Cortisol is like a hypervigilant security chief. Its job is not to make you look good in a swimsuit. Its job is to mobilize energy right now so you can fight, run, or think your way out of trouble. It raises your blood pressure, it helps your liver push more glucose into your bloodstream, and it makes your brain laser focused on whatever looks like a threat. Under normal conditions, this hormone runs on a very precise daily rhythm. This is the phase when cortisol peaks in the early morning, about 30 to 45 minutes after you wake up. That spike helps you get out of bed, regulate your blood sugar, and switch your metabolism from night mode to day mode. Through the afternoon, levels gradually fall, helping your body wind down. By late evening and into the night, cortisol should be at its lowest, allowing deep sleep, repair of your cells, and healthy hormone balance. This rhythm is not a minor detail. It is like the conductor's baton for your hormones. When cortisol rises and falls at the right times, your insulin, your hunger signals, your brain chemistry, and even how you store fat stay in a more stable pattern. Your body can burn energy efficiently during the day and repair quietly at night. Cortisol itself is not the villain. Short bursts are essential. It helps you slam on the brakes before a collision, deliver a presentation, or power through a hard workout. The problem begins when the alarm never really shuts off, when your brain keeps telling your adrenals danger, danger, even while you're just scrolling emails at midnight. Meanwhile, certain fat cells are listening more closely than others. The fat around your abdomen, especially the deeper visceral fat wrapped around your organs, has more receptors for cortisol, making it unusually obedient to the security chief's orders. It's like your belly fat is standing at attention, ready to store energy the moment cortisol says, "Prepare for famine." This marks a turning point in how that hormone shapes your waistline. When cortisol stays high day after day, those abdominal fat cells don't just listen, they adapt. In the next section, you'll see how chronic stress quietly trains your belly fat to grow even when the scale barely moves. Those abdominal fat cells are now on high alert, but the real twist comes from timing. Your metabolism doesn't just care about how much cortisol you make, it cares about when. In a healthy rhythm, cortisol is like your internal sunrise. It surges in the early morning, telling your body, wake up, mobilize energy, burn fuel. By night it falls low, letting your brain wind down, your insulin works smoothly, and your cells repair. Imagine a gentle wave, high in the morning, gliding down through the day, quiet at night. Under chronic stress, that wave flattens. The morning peak is blunted, so you drag yourself out of bed even after a full night in bed. Meanwhile, cortisol stays elevated into the evening, or hovers at a constant mid-level all day. It's like your stress system forgot how to turn the dimmer switch, leaving your metabolism stuck in an uncomfortable gray zone. This flattened curve doesn't stay in isolation. It confuses other hormones that depend on that daily script. Insulin becomes less responsive, so your body has a harder time moving glucose into cells without storing more as fat. Leptin, the hormone that should say you've had enough, starts whispering instead of shouting, while ghrelin, your hunger signal, gets louder and more erratic, especially at night. Think of it this way. The normal conversation between your hormones turns into a noisy argument. Thyroid hormones, which set your metabolic speed, may dial down, making you burn fewer calories at rest. Sex hormones can shift as well, nudging fat away from hips and thighs and steering more of it into your midsection. The message is clear. Conserve, store, protect the core. This is the phase when your body interprets ongoing stress as a long-term threat or famine. Even if you're not fasting, your metabolism behaves as if resources are scarce. You become more efficient at holding on to energy and less willing to spend it. In fact, this survival strategy made sense when stress meant winter, war, or drought. Today, it just means your email, your commute, and your late night scrolling are being translated into don't let go of that belly fat. To fuel this chronic alarm, cortisol pushes your body to break down muscle in your arms and legs for quick glucose. Over time, that loss of lean tissue lowers your metabolic rate, so you burn fewer calories all day. Meanwhile, more of the fat you store is directed toward your torso, especially around vital organs in the abdominal cavity. It's like your body is building a protective energy shield around your liver, pancreas, and intestines, just in case the crisis never ends. But not all fat in that area behaves the same way. In the next section, you'll see how the fat wrapped tightly around your organs is uniquely wired to obey cortisol's constant whisper, and why that makes it far more dangerous than the pinchable layer under your skin. That protective shield around your organs actually comes in two very different versions. On the outside, you have one kind of belly. Deep inside, you're carrying another. And cortisol doesn't treat them equally. Imagine grabbing a handful of your belly, your hips, or the back of your arm. That soft, squishy layer you can pinch is subcutaneous fat. It sits just under your skin, like padding sewn into the lining of a jacket. For many people, this is the fat that shows up in photos and tight clothes in the mirror. It can be frustrating or embarrassing, but in the short term, it's often more cosmetic than immediately dangerous. Subcutaneous fat still stores energy. It still responds to hormones like insulin. But most of the time, it behaves more like a passive backpack your body is wearing on the outside. It weighs you down, it changes your shape, yet it isn't constantly flooding your blood with alarm signals. In fact, having some of this outer fat can even be metabolically neutral, especially when it's balanced across your body instead of concentrated. At your waist, now move inward, past the abdominal wall, past the pinchable layer. This is where visceral fat lives. Think of it this way. Instead of sitting under your skin, visceral fat is packed between your organs, wrapping around your liver, intestines, and pancreas like insulation stuffed into a crowded engine compartment. You often don't see it clearly until your waistline thickens, your belt fits differently, or your belly starts to feel firm rather than soft. This is the phase when cortisol shows its true preference. Visceral fat cells have up to 4 times more cortisol receptors than many other fat depots. It's like that inner fat has its phone line directly connected to your stress hormones, picking up every time cortisol rings. When your cortisol stays high day after day, those deep fat cells are the first to hear the signal to store, to hold, to protect. Meanwhile, your outer subcutaneous fat is more like a bystander. It still participates, but the real action is under the hood. Inside your abdominal cavity, visceral fat doesn't just sit there quietly. This marks a turning point in how you think about belly fat. That inner layer behaves more like an endocrine organ than a passive storage tank. Here's the pattern interrupt. You think you're just gaining weight, but visceral fat is actively releasing inflammatory molecules and hormones of its own, talking back to your brain, your liver, and your metabolism. It can amplify cortisol's message, disrupt insulin, and lock you into a stress fat cycle that feels impossible to break. In the next section, you'll see how that hidden belly starts rewiring your hunger, your cravings, and even your mood. That hidden belly isn't just sitting there, it's evolving over time. Imagine pressing repeat on that stress signal, day after day, for an entire month. No lab coat, no experiment, just the way many busy people actually live. Rushed mornings, late emails, shallow sleep, and a brain that never really powers down. Think of it this way. The first week is quiet on the outside, loud on the inside. Your appetite starts to drift upward, especially in the late afternoon and at night. You're not binging, but you're grazing more. Reaching for quick comfort foods that deliver fast glucose to calm your brain. Sleep gets lighter. You wake up once or twice, and you don't feel fully restored. This is the phase when your hormones begin to tilt. Cortisol stays higher into the evening, ghrelin pushes hunger, and leptin's "you've had enough" signal gets fuzzy. Your waistband feels a touch tighter by Friday, but the scale barely moves. By the second week, the changes become more physical, even if they're still easy to blame on a big lunch. Cortisol keeps telling your kidneys to hold on to sodium and water so your midsection feels puffy, especially at night. It's like your body is quietly inflating a small inner life jacket around your organs. In fact, this is when extra calories are increasingly steered toward visceral fat rather than being spread evenly under the skin. Your liver is still handling glucose and insulin as best it can, but the message from cortisol is clear. Conserve energy. Store centrally. Prepare for a crisis that never arrives. Weeks 3 and 4 are when the mirror and your clothes start to argue with your habits. Your overall weight might be up only a pound or two, yet your belt notch has changed. Pants that fit last month now press into your abdomen by midday. Meanwhile, your arms and legs may look the same, or even a bit leaner because high cortisol quietly breaks down muscle protein there to free up amino acids for glucose production. This marks a turning point in your metabolism. More belly, less muscle, and a lower resting energy burn even when you're just sitting at your desk. Meanwhile, beneath that growing ring of visceral fat, a deeper shift is underway. Your liver is being bathed in higher free fatty acids and inflammatory signals, pushing it toward insulin resistance and, over time, fatty liver. Your pancreas has to pump out more insulin to keep glucose in range. Your brain is exposed to a steady drizzle of stress hormones and inflammatory molecules that can dull motivation and sharpen cravings. In the next section, you'll see how that stressed belly doesn't just sit there, it starts whispering to your hunger, your mood, and even your decision-making. That whispering belly doesn't just complain. It reaches up and puts its hands on your appetite controls. Imagine two simple signals running your eating decisions behind the scenes. Ghrelin is your I'm hungry alarm. Leptin is your I'm full, you can stop now break. Under normal conditions, they move in a rhythm. Ghrelin rises before meals to nudge you to eat. Leptin climbs after meals to tell your brain you've had enough. And together they help your body keep fat and energy in balance. Think of it this way. Ghrelin is the gas pedal. Leptin is the seatbelt and the brake. Your brain listens to both to decide how much food to take in and how much fat to store. When sleep is decent, stress comes and goes, and meals are predictable. This system is surprisingly precise. You eat, you feel satisfied, you move on. Chronic cortisol breaks that rhythm. Elevated stress hormones push ghrelin up, especially later in the day and into the evening. At the same time, your brain becomes less sensitive to leptin. Even if your fat cells are shouting, "There's plenty of energy stored here." The result is a strange experience. You feel hungrier than your actual energy needs, and normal portions don't feel as satisfying. This is the phase when you finish dinner and still wander back to the kitchen. It's not just lack of willpower. Your hormones are literally turning up the volume on hunger while muting the fullness signal. In fact, studies show that people under chronic stress eat more calories without even realizing it, especially at night. Meanwhile, cortisol doesn't just make you want more food, it changes what you want. High cortisol primes your body to crave fast fuel, high sugar, high fat, highly processed foods that spike glucose quickly. It's like your metabolism is convinced a crisis is coming and demands the quickest burning logs for the fire. Pastries, chips, ice cream, sweet coffee drinks, these combine sugar and fat in a way your brain finds intensely rewarding. You can see this play out in real life. After a brutal day, you collapse on the couch and suddenly, that late-night snack feels non-negotiable. After a tense meeting, the pastry tray in the office kitchen pulls you in. Your body gets a quick hit of glucose, insulin rises, your brain gets a brief sense of relief, and cortisol dips for a moment. But under high cortisol, Those extra calories are more likely to end up as visceral belly fat, right around your organs. That fat depot is packed with cortisol, receptors. So every stressed snack reinforces the very area you're trying to shrink. And here's the twist. Even if you resist the cravings and eat clean, cortisol has another strategy. Next, you'll see how it can reprogram your existing fat cells to expand your waistline anyway. Cortisol doesn't just change where your calories go. It changes how your fat cells think. Imagine zooming in on your belly, past the skin, into the deep visceral layer wrapped around your organs. Those fat cells are not passive storage bags. They're more like tiny decision makers, covered in receptors, enzymes, and signaling pathways that constantly decide should they store energy or release it back into your bloodstream. Under chronic stress, that decision tilts in one direction. Visceral belly fat carries more glucocorticoid receptors than many other fat depots, which means it hears cortisol louder. Think of it this way. If cortisol is the stress broadcast, your abdominal fat has the volume turned up to maximum. On top of that, enzymes like 11-HSD1 inside those cells can actually convert inactive cortisone into active cortisol, amplifying the signal right where you least want it. This is the phase when your belly fat stops behaving like neutral storage and starts acting like a paranoid prepper. Cortisol's message is clear. Famine might be coming, hoard energy. So those cells increase fat uptake from the bloodstream, grabbing triglycerides every time your blood carries them past. They pull in more glucose as well, converting it into fat to pack away for later. At first, the existing cells just swell. Each one can expand several times its original size, stretching like an overfilled pantry. Over time, if the stress signal doesn't calm down, your body takes a more permanent step. It begins to create new fat cells in that same abdominal neighborhood. This marks a turning point. You're not just filling storage, you're building extra storage units. Meanwhile, other areas of your body may be shrinking. Cortisol can break down muscle in your arms and legs for quick glucose, especially if your protein intake is low or your sleep is poor. It's like your metabolism is dismantling furniture in the living room to keep fueling the bunker in the basement. The net weight change might be small, but your shape and health risk profile are shifting dramatically. Here's a pattern interrupt. Imagine two people eating the same number of calories. Same meals, same macros, same timing. One sleeps well, manages stress, and has a steady cortisol rhythm that peaks in the morning and falls at night. The other has chronically high cortisol from late-night emails, poor sleep, and constant pressure. On the outside, they might weigh almost the same. Inside, their fat distribution is completely different. The calmer person tends to store more fat under the skin, spread out, with better insulin sensitivity. The stressed person channels more of those calories into visceral belly fat with hyper-responsive cortisol receptors and overactive 11-HSD1, reinforcing the waistline. In fact, that mysterious belly that grows even when your diet looks reasonable is often this cellular story playing out. Next, you'll see how this stress-shaped fat depot begins to talk back to your hormones, your liver, and even your brain, locking in the cycle unless you interrupt it. That talking doesn't stay quiet for long. Imagine your belly becoming the loudest organ in the room, even though it never makes a sound. As cortisol stays high, that stress-shaped fat depot doesn't just sit there, it starts to reshape your entire body from the inside out. This is the phase when your muscles quietly pay the price. Under chronic stress, cortisol acts like a demolition crew in your arms, legs, and shoulders. It walks into your muscle cells, breaks down protein into amino acids, and sends them to your liver, Your liver then converts those amino acids into glucose, a quick, ready-to-use fuel for emergencies. It's like your body is constantly bracing for a sprint that never actually happens. Think of it this way. Every stressful night, every deadline, every argument is treated as a survival event. To keep glucose available, cortisol tells your body, tear down the muscle, keep the sugar coming. Over weeks and months, that means less lean mass in your limbs. Your shirts might feel looser around the sleeves, your legs may look leaner, even more defined. But underneath that illusion of tone, your metabolic engine is shrinking. Muscle is one of your most metabolically active tissues. Even when you sit, sleep, or scroll on your phone, it quietly burns calories just to maintain itself. As cortisol strips muscle away, your resting metabolism drops. You burn fewer calories doing the exact same daily routine. In fact, the energy that would have been used to feed muscle now becomes easier to store as fat, especially when your hormones are stressed and your insulin is nudged higher. Meanwhile, cortisol is not breaking down fat evenly across your body. It is redirecting it. High cortisol pushes more fat toward the middle, especially into visceral fat deep around your organs, and subcutaneous fat just under the skin of your abdomen. Your limbs can look slimmer while your torso thickens. It's like your body is moving furniture out of the spare rooms in your arms and legs and stacking it all in the hallway of your waist. Imagine a busy professional who does everything right on the surface. Hard workouts at 6 a.m., emails late into the night, 5 hours of sleep, coffee as a food group. Over time, the mirror shows more definition in the arms and shoulders, but the belt notch creeps outward. The scale barely moves, yet the waistline grows. That is cortisol's signature, muscle quietly dissolving, belly quietly expanding. This marks a turning point. That growing ring of belly fat is not passive storage anymore. It begins releasing inflammatory signals, whispering to your insulin, nudging your metabolism toward resistance and rigidity. Next, you'll see how this stressed midsection starts to reprogram your hormones, your liver, and even your brain, locking you into a metabolic pattern that feels almost impossible to escape. Now, that ring of belly fat isn't just growing, it's talking. Not with words, but with chemicals that echo through your entire body. This is the phase when your midsection quietly turns into an endocrine organ, not passive storage, but hormonally active tissue that behaves more like a gland. Imagine each pocket of visceral fat as a tiny factory. Inside, cells are busy secreting inflammatory cytokines like IL-6 and TNF-A, along with adipokines that act like long-distance messengers. They don't stay local. They drift through your blood, reaching your muscles, your liver, even your brain, constantly updating the system with one message: we are under stress. Think of it this way. Your body is trying to adapt to chronic tension by reshaping your metabolism. Those inflammatory signals interfere with insulin's usual job, which is to escort glucose from your blood into your cells. Receptors on muscle and fat cells become less responsive, almost deaf to insulin's knock, so glucose lingers in the bloodstream. Your pancreas responds by pushing out even more insulin, trying to force the same door open. At first, you might not feel this directly, maybe just an afternoon crash, stronger cravings, a brain that feels slightly foggier after meals. But metabolically, this marks a turning point. Higher baseline insulin plus persistently elevated cortisol create a powerful storage command, especially in your abdomen. It's like your hormones have agreed on a new policy: protect the core at all costs. Meanwhile, that extra insulin doesn't just hover. It amplifies cortisol's signal in visceral fat. Together, they encourage your belly fat cells to pull in more glucose and more fatty acids, lock them away, and resist giving them back as energy. This is why you can cut calories, exercise, even flirt with fasting, and still feel like your waistline is the last place to change. The chemistry around your midsection is biased towards storage, not release. In fact, the more visceral fat you accumulate, the louder this chemical conversation becomes. More IL-6, more TNF-A, more adipokines that nudge your metabolism toward insulin resistance. Inflammation rises, insulin climbs, cortisol stays high, trying to manage the ongoing internal emergency, and your belly responds by expanding its influence. Stress raises cortisol. Cortisol promotes visceral fat. Visceral fat releases inflammatory molecules. Inflammation worsens insulin resistance. Insulin and cortisol together drive even more belly fat. It's a loop that tightens with time. One of the first organs to feel trapped in this toxic neighborhood is your liver. Even if your diet looks healthy on paper, those inflammatory signals and high insulin quietly push your liver to start storing fat inside its own cells. From the outside, your labs might still look normal and the scale might barely move. But inside, your liver is changing texture, turning from a flexible filter into a sluggish warehouse. In the next phase, you'll see how this hidden fatty shift inside your liver can warp your blood sugar, your hormones, and even how your brain experiences hunger. Your liver is now in the spotlight. From the outside, nothing dramatic is happening, but inside, this organ is acting like the central control tower for your metabolism, quietly trying to keep you alive under constant hormonal pressure. Your liver manages blood sugar, filters toxins, produces cholesterol, and packages fat so it can be shipped out to other tissues for energy. Think of it this way. Almost every major fuel decision in your body passes through this one hub. Now add chronic cortisol and growing visceral belly fat to that workload. Visceral fat doesn't just sit there. It behaves like an overactive endocrine organ, constantly releasing free fatty acids and inflammatory signals. Those fatty acids don't wander randomly. They drain straight into the portal vein, the direct highway from your belly to your liver. It's like your liver is standing at the end of a conveyor belt that never switches off, catching load after load of fat all day long. Meanwhile, cortisol is whispering a different command. Make more glucose. Under stress, your liver ramps up glucose production, pushing extra sugar into the bloodstream in case you need fast energy to escape a threat. But in modern life, you're usually not running, you're sitting. Insulin is already high from frequent eating and hidden sugars. This is the phase when that combination becomes dangerous. High cortisol plus high insulin tells your liver to convert that extra glucose into fat and stash it inside its own cells. Over time, tiny droplets of fat begin to accumulate inside your liver cells. At first, you feel nothing. No stabbing pain, no obvious alarm. Early-stage fatty liver is silent. You can have a normal BMI, normal liver enzymes, even a clean physical. Yet you might notice subtle changes, heavier afternoon fatigue, brain fog after meals, and stubborn belly fat that ignores calorie cuts and extra workouts. In fact, that mismatch, healthy on paper, exhausted in real life, is often the earliest clue that your liver is under siege. Here's the pattern interrupt. Imagine someone you know who doesn't look that overweight. Maybe their arms and legs are relatively lean, their face looks fine, their scale barely budges. On the outside, they pass as just a little soft around the middle. On the inside, their liver could be quietly marbled with fat, like a piece of meat with hidden streaks you only see once it's sliced open. This marks a turning point because that silent marbling raises the risk of insulin resistance, high triglycerides, and long-term metabolic disease if cortisol stays high. Your liver is still fighting back, still trying to clear, package, and export fat. But as cortisol-driven signals keep arriving, its ability to keep blood sugar stable and hormones balanced starts to warp. Next, you'll see how that stressed, fatty liver can reshape your hunger, your cravings, and even how your brain decides when you're truly full. That distorted hunger is a clue. If you're still here following this chain from stress to belly fat to a struggling liver, it means you're not just casually curious. You actually want to know what your hormones are doing to you, hour by hour, even when you're not paying attention. Imagine being able to look at your own cravings, your energy crashes, your stubborn waistline and think, oh, that's cortisol talking. Instead of just blaming willpower, think of it this way. Your body is running a 24-hour hormone script, and you're finally starting to read the lines. This is the phase when understanding the script becomes just as powerful as any diet or workout. If that kind of deep dive into your hormones, metabolism, and fat storage patterns fascinates you, this is a good moment to stay connected. Subscribing or following means you keep getting explanations like this: how cortisol reshapes your belly fat, how insulin quietly redirects calories, how your liver, your brain, and your fat cells negotiate over energy every single day. It's like having a guided tour of your own biology, instead of guessing in the dark. In fact, the most surprising part of this cortisol story hasn't even started yet. So far, you've seen what happens while you're awake. Stress spikes, belly fat responds, your liver bends to the pressure. But cortisol is not just a daytime hormone. When its rhythm breaks, your nights change too. Your brain, your sleep cycles, and even the way you store fat at midnight begin to shift. Meanwhile, research shows that short sleep and chronic stress can push cortisol up at exactly the wrong hours. Less than 6 hours of sleep, night after night, is strongly linked to a larger waistline even when weight barely changes. Visceral belly fat has more cortisol receptors than many other fat depots, which means nighttime spikes don't just disturb your dreams, they tell that deep abdominal fat to grow. This marks a turning point in the story because now your bed, your supposed recovery zone, can become a quiet fat storage zone. If you want more practical strategies to reverse this, how to lower cortisol, protect your sleep, and teach your metabolism to stop clinging to belly fat, subscribing keeps those tools coming. No hard sell, just a quick pause in the middle of the story so you don't miss the rest of it. Right now, the focus comes straight back to your body. Because the next chapter is where it gets uncomfortably real. You'll see why late night stress, glowing screens, and just one more email are uniquely fattening. And you'll see what your cortisol and belly fat are doing while you're supposed to be asleep. Now the camera zooms in on your night. Not the highlight reel, but the part where your room is dark, your phone is glowing, and your brain refuses to shut up. In a normal night, your hormones are supposed to flip roles. Cortisol should sink low, like the lights dimming in a theater, while melatonin rises and tells your body it's safe to go into deep repair mode. This is the phase when your brain does memory cleanup, your cells repair damage, and your metabolism quietly shifts toward burning fat instead of constantly managing glucose from late snacks. Think of it this way. Nighttime is when your hormonal operating system is scheduled to reboot. But late night emails, endless scrolling, and replaying tomorrow's problems send a different signal. Your eyes take in bright blue light, your brain sees urgent messages, and your nervous system acts as if danger is still present. Instead of dropping, cortisol stays higher than it should, flattening that natural curve. Deep sleep becomes shorter, lighter, or chopped into pieces. It's like your body keeps one foot on the gas pedal all night, never fully entering the slow wave sleep that restores your hormones and trims back belly fat. Researchers see this play out in the data. Consistently getting under 6 hours of sleep doesn't just make you tired. It's strongly associated with higher cortisol levels and a thicker waistline, even when the scale barely moves. your body can keep total weight relatively stable while quietly packing more fat around your organs. Visceral belly fat is especially responsive to cortisol, so each short night is another nudge to store more energy right where you least want it. Meanwhile, the consequences show up the next morning. After a poor night, your hunger hormones are scrambled. Ghrelin, the signal that says eat now, rises while your brain becomes less sensitive to leptin, the hormone that usually tells you you've had enough. Imagine walking into the day with your appetite dial turned up and your fullness signal turned down. Your body pushes you toward quick energy. Sugary, fatty foods that spike glucose and insulin. And because your prefrontal cortex is foggier from lack of deep sleep, your willpower to resist those choices is lower exactly when you need it most. This marks a turning point in the story. Night after night of stress and broken sleep keep cortisol elevated, drive cravings, and feed the very belly fat that then keeps your hormones more unstable. It's a loop. But here's the twist. It's not only sleep and food that decide how high your cortisol runs. There's another overlooked player, how you move your body and exactly when you choose to push it. In fact, the way you exercise can quietly lower cortisol or lock in that stubborn belly fat even more. This is where a surprise shows up. You can be doing everything right in the gym and still training your belly fat to stay. Not because movement is bad, but because of how and when you're pushing your body. Imagine your typical high-pressure day. You wake up already behind, run on caffeine, barely sit down, answer messages late into the afternoon. Your hormones are in stress mode before you even change your clothes. Then, at 7 or 8 p.m., you slam a pre-workout, head into a brutal HIIT class, and ask your body for one more all-out performance. On paper, it looks healthy. Inside, it's like stacking another brick on an already overloaded system. Cortisol naturally should peak in the morning and slide down at night. But intense late evening workouts can flip that curve. Your heart rate spikes, adrenaline rises, and cortisol surges again just when your body was supposed to be winding down. Do this on top of poor sleep and constant alerts from your phone, and your metabolism doesn't get a true off switch. This is the phase when your brain stops seeing exercise as relief and starts logging it as yet another emergency. Think of it this way. High-intensity training is like a powerful drug. Used occasionally with respect and recovery, it can increase fitness, build resilience, and burn fat. Used daily on top of chronic stress, it keeps cortisol elevated long after you leave the gym. That hormone signal tells your cells to break down muscle for quick energy, especially from your arms and legs, while preserving and even adding fat deep around your organs. Central belly fat has more cortisol receptors, so it listens the loudest. Meanwhile, you might see a high calorie burn on your watch and wonder why your waistline doesn't budge. This marks a turning point for many people. They respond by pushing harder, adding more intensity, more classes, more miles. But with recovery missing, sleep shortened, and food rushed, the body shifts into conservation mode. Muscle becomes more fragile, insulin sensitivity worsens, and that ring of fat around your midsection behaves like a long-term storage vault. Now contrast that with cortisol-friendly movement. Moderate intensity walks during the day, resistance training with real rest between sets, and workouts earlier when cortisol is naturally higher send a different message. Your heart rate still climbs, your muscles still work, but your nervous system doesn't feel attacked. Over time, this pattern helps normalize the cortisol curve, improves how your body uses insulin, and makes it easier to tap into belly fat for energy instead of guarding it. Here's the pattern interrupt. More intensity does not always equal more fat loss. Under chronic stress, your favorite all-out routine can quietly become a belly fat trap. The real leverage isn't just in how hard you move, but in how intelligently you pair effort with recovery and what else your hormones are dealing with that day. In the next part, you'll see how simple shifts in timing, breathing, and daily rhythm can finally let your cortisol and your waistline exhale. This is where your strategy shifts from fight the fat to retrain the rhythm. Instead of chasing perfection, you begin teaching your hormones what to expect day after day, so cortisol no longer has an excuse to stay high. Think of it this way. Your body loves patterns. When you wake, eat, move, and sleep around the same times, your internal clock starts predicting safety. Cortisol rises in the morning to get you out of bed, then should gradually fall as the day goes on. But irregular meals, midnight scrolling, and random workouts at odd hours keep that curve jagged. Aim for regular meal times, a consistent sleep and wake window, and movement that shows up like a reliable friend, not an occasional emergency. This marks a turning point from chaos to rhythm. Food becomes your quiet cortisol signal. When you eat enough, protein, fiber, and healthy fats at each meal, your blood sugar climbs gently and lands softly instead of spiking and crashing. Stable glucose means your brain doesn't have to call in cortisol every few hours just to keep you upright. Imagine a plate with protein the size of your palm, colorful vegetables for fiber, and a visible source of fat like olive oil, avocado, or nuts. It's like telling your nervous system, there is fuel, you are not in danger. In fact, extreme restriction and yo-yo dieting send the opposite message, convincing your metabolism that famine is always around the corner. This is the phase when your approach to calories matters more than the raw number. A gentle deficit, just enough that you lose slowly, paired with stress management, lets your body tap belly fat without panicking. Crash diets do the reverse. They slash energy so sharply that cortisol spikes, hunger hormones surge, and your brain becomes obsessed with high sugar, high fat comfort foods. You might drop weight fast, but your body is more likely to protect visceral belly fat and sacrifice muscle in your arms and legs, lowering your long-term metabolic rate. Over time, that trade is brutal for your waistline. Meanwhile, tiny daily practices act like anchors. A 10-minute walk after meals helps your muscles soak up glucose, so insulin stays steadier and cortisol doesn't have to clean up the mess. Cutting off caffeine earlier in the day stops that subtle evening cortisol bump that steals deep sleep. A simple wind-down routine, dim lights, slower breathing, no intense emails, signals safety to your nervous system so cortisol can finally drop. It doesn't need to be elaborate. It just needs to be repeatable. And here's the twist. The most powerful shift isn't only in what you eat or when you walk, but in how your brain reads your day. The same schedule can feel like a threat or a challenge, and that perception alone can raise or lower cortisol. Next, you'll see how changing the story your brain tells about stress can reshape your hormones and eventually your belly from the inside out. So now the real question becomes, how does your brain decide what counts as a threat in the first place? Because your belly is listening to that decision. Imagine your day like a movie, and your brain is constantly scoring each scene as safe or dangerous. Deep inside, the amygdala is your internal alarm bell. It doesn't care whether the danger is a lion, a late-night email from your boss, or an awkward silence in a meeting. If the amygdala flags it as threat, it yanks on the HPA axis and your hormones respond. Cortisol rises, your body prepares for impact, and your metabolism quietly shifts towards survival mode. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex sits in the front row as the rational narrator. This is the part of your brain that can say, it's just an email, not a tiger. When the prefrontal cortex is online, it can calm the amygdala, dial down the HPA axis, and let cortisol fall back toward its normal rhythm. Think of it this way. The amygdala slams the accelerator, the prefrontal cortex reaches for the brakes. Your belly fat is caught between those pedals. This is why two people can live through the same event and have completely different cortisol curves. One person feels trapped, out of control, and alone. Their brain reads no escape, and cortisol stays high for hours. Another person faces the same deadline but feels supported, resourced, and capable. The situation is still intense, but the perception is challenge, not catastrophe, and the cortisol spike is shorter and smaller. The difference isn't the email, it's the sense of safety, control, and tools. This is the phase when tiny nervous system tools start to matter more than they look. Slow exhalations, for example, are not just relaxing. They activate the brake pedal of your parasympathetic system, sending a direct all-clear signal from your lungs and diaphragm back up to your brain. Brief mindfulness moments, even 60 seconds of feeling your feet on the floor, pull attention out of mental worst-case scenarios and give the prefrontal cortex more grip. Micro breaks, a short walk, unclenching your jaw, dropping your shoulders, each one whispers to your body, you're not in immediate danger. In fact, when your brain receives enough of those safety signals, cortisol doesn't need to hover at crisis levels. Over time, that changes where your body stores energy. Visceral belly fat, especially around your organs, is packed with cortisol receptors. When your brain is bracing for constant threat, that depot becomes prime real estate for storage. When the threat dial finally turns down, your metabolism can gradually stop hoarding fat around the organs and redistribute energy more evenly. This marks a turning point. Belly fat stops being a random curse and starts acting more like a readable signal from your hormones, your sleep, your food, your movement, and your stress tools all at once. And when those pieces begin to line up, another layer of the story appears. Not just how much fat you carry, but what that fat is telling you about the bigger pattern running your life. That's where you're headed next. So instead of seeing belly fat as an enemy, you can start seeing it as a message, not a moral judgment, a survival signal. Imagine your body as a system that only speaks in biology, not in shame. When cortisol stays high, that extra fat around your waist is your body saying, the world doesn't feel safe. I'm preparing you. Think of it this way. Your biology is ancient, but your lifestyle is modern. Your body was built for short bursts of danger and long stretches of recovery, a sprint away from a predator, a hard hunt, followed by firelight, darkness, and sleep. It was never designed for constant low-grade alarms, late-night emails, and blue light telling your brain that midnight is still afternoon. In that older world, cortisol would spike, help you survive, then drop. Today, the spike never fully ends. Chronic stress flattens your cortisol rhythm, so instead of a strong peak in the morning and a gentle slope at night, you get a dull, elevated line. This is the phase when your metabolism quietly shifts from flexible and responsive to rigid and defensive. Now picture your hormones as a survival orchestra. Cortisol is the conductor, waving its baton louder and faster than it should. Belly fat is the percussion section, pounding harder with every stressful day. Meanwhile, your liver, your muscles, your brain, and your pancreas are all trying to play along with this chaotic tempo, even though the music was written for a calmer song. Visceral belly fat, the fat wrapped around your organs, is especially tuned to that conductor. In fact, it has far more cortisol receptors than many other fat depots, which means it hears every stressful signal and responds by storing more energy right in the center of your body. It's like your abdomen becomes the emergency pantry, stocked in case famine is coming, even if your fridge is full. But the orchestra doesn't stop there. High cortisol alters hunger hormones like ghrelin and leptin, making you hungrier and nudging you toward high sugar, high fat foods. At the same time, it encourages muscle breakdown in your arms and legs, lowering your metabolic rate so you burn fewer calories at rest. Your cells become more resistant to insulin, inflammation rises, and that belly fat starts sending its own inflammatory signals back into your bloodstream. This marks a turning point. Belly fat is no longer just stored energy. It becomes an active player in the stress story, feeding the very hormonal chaos that created it. The more it grows, the louder the survival orchestra plays. So the real target isn't just a flat stomach. The deeper goal is restoring a healthy cortisol rhythm, calming the conductor, and bringing your metabolism back into balance. When you do that, a leaner waistline becomes a downstream effect, not the only measure of success. And next, you'll see what actually starts to change in your day when you begin training your body out of chronic alarm mode. So now the question becomes, what do you actually do with all of this? Imagine treating the next 7 days as a small experiment, not a lifelong overhaul. Instead of trying to fix your entire life, you choose one lever that tells your body you're safe. One sleep window, one evening screen cutoff, one daily walk, or one 5-minute breathing practice. Think of it this way. For 7 days, you run a personal cortisol lab. You keep your usual meals, your usual schedule, but you change one signal your hormones are getting. Maybe you commit to being in bed from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., even if sleep isn't perfect. Maybe you shut down bright screens 1 hour before bed. Maybe you walk 10 to 20 minutes after into your largest meal. Or you sit once a day and breathe slowly for 5 minutes, letting your exhale be just a bit longer than your inhale. This is the phase when you stop only looking at the mirror or the scale. Instead, you track one simple feedback loop. You can measure your waist at the belly button every morning. You can notice how your clothes fit around your waistband. You can rate your morning energy from 1 to 10. Or you can pay attention to cravings, especially for high sugar, high fat foods that cortisol loves to push you toward. The goal isn't dramatic fat loss in a week. It's to catch the earliest hints that your metabolism is shifting out of alarm mode. A slightly looser waistband. Waking up a bit less wired and tired. Fewer late-night raids on the kitchen. This marks a turning point. You begin to see that when your nervous system calms, your belly often follows. Meanwhile, remember the core story your body has been living. Chronic high cortisol nudges fat toward your belly, where fat cells have more cortisol receptors and act like a magnet for stress. It alters hunger hormones, pushing you to eat more while breaking down muscle in your arms and legs, quietly lowering your metabolic rate. It inflames your organs from your liver to your blood vessels and traps you in a loop where stress creates belly fat, and belly fat sends more inflammatory signals back to your brain. In fact, that loop is not fixed. It can be interrupted. Ask yourself, have you noticed your waistline changing during the most stressful periods of your life? And are you willing, just for 7 days, to treat that change as feedback rather than failure? So choose your 7-day habit and commit in the comments: sleep window, screen cutoff, walk, or breathing. Share the one you're testing, track one simple metric, and watch what shifts. Subscribe if you want deeper dives into hormones, metabolism, and how your body actually decides where to store fat. Because changing how your body stores fat begins with changing how your body feels safe